We'll start off with our land acknowledgement. Spanning generations, acknowledgement of the land is a traditional custom of Indigenous people when welcoming outsiders onto their land and into their homes. To build respectful relationships, acknowledging the land is an important part of reconciliation. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we acknowledge we are on and support mentoring for youth in the traditional territories across Alberta of the many First Nations from Treaties 6, 7, and 8, the Métis of the 8 Alberta settlements, and Inuit people whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. These lands are the traditional meeting grounds and homes for many Indigenous peoples for generations. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. We are all treaty people, beneficiaries of the peace and prosperity the treaties have brought, and committed also to working towards the equity and justice of the treaties promised. Welcome, everyone. Before we do our introductions in the chat box, where we'd like to get to know you a little bit, we'd get you to type in your name, where you're from, your role, where you heard about this webinar. We have a bunch of things that we want to know from you today. Is this the first time you're with us? And then one thing that you hope to get from us. And while you're thinking about all of that, we'll introduce the team. My name is Kim McConnell, and I am part of the Alberta Mentoring Partnership team. And I will be co-hosting with Caroline Gosling, and I'll get her to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Caroline Gosling. I guess I'm trying to think of my role. I'm a retired educator from Edmonton Public. While I was seconded to Alberta Education, I actually had Kim's role for a little while supporting the Alberta Mentoring Partnership. And now I consider myself a friend of AMP.
Also joining us from our AMP team today is Andrew Harris. He'll give us a big wave. He is all things technology related for our team. We also have Al Chapman, who is the Alberta Mentoring Partnership lead, and he'll be sharing with us a little bit about Connections First resources today. And we have a special partner guest that works side by side with Alberta Mentoring Partnership, and that's Kirsty Keys, and she's going to talk to us about evaluation as we move along. And one of our members that's not able to join us today, Tanya Taranjo, will be joining us to via video clip to share Indigenous resources. So thank you, Holly, for typing in your information in the chat box. So Holly's from Ontario, and she's a social worker, and it's her first time attending with us. And she's looking towards learning about more ways that she can improve engagement and programs with teens that have been diagnosed with autism. We've got Sue from the Edmonton Public Library joining us. I know Karen is coming from Grand Yellowhead Public School Division. She's I believe a best success coach now, correct? Yeah, perfect. Welcome. Caroline and I had the opportunity to meet with Grand Yellowhead folks earlier this year for their professional development day. Ah, Michelle Roy. Welcome. So it is you, Michelle. Welcome. Okay. The objectives today are to learn about some mentoring tools that are out there, and then to also get you folks to share with us some of the tools that you use in your environment so that we can create a great, big, huge resource tool list that others can use. Caroline?
Okay, I'll unmute here. So for those of you who are new to the Alberta Mentoring Partnership, it is a partnership of government ministries, government-funded organizations, schools, community organizations, all working together to provide more mentoring opportunities. And we know that young people thrive through mentoring relationships. So AMP's mission is to strengthen Alberta's capacity to support and enhance mentoring. So AMP does not actually do any direct mentoring, but supports organizations that do that work. Organizations, schools, people. Kim, do you want to talk about the grant?
Sure, I can do that. So we have a wonderful partner that provides private grant funding so that we can support mentoring in schools and help to increase adult capacity both within our school systems and in community serving agencies that work with our teens both in schools and out of schools. And we're really trying to help to advance our adolescent social emotional competencies. So making sure that they feel connected and feel safe in places that they want to connect with their mentors. So we've prior to me coming and supporting AMP, Caroline was able to offer some face-to-face opportunities prior to COVID, and then we've done some online meetings, resource development, and lots of networking. And so Caroline has been reviewing our resources, and she's going to be highlighting those pieces for us today. And we are so grateful for her being our AMP community partner, champion, supporter in all ways.
So we're just going to share some resources and a little bit about them. And then we're going to get you to share any resources that you're using that could be helpful for people, because our list is certainly not exhaustive. And actually, there were probably more resources than we thought we would include here. So our plan is to create a list of the tools we talk about here, tools that you share, as well as some that we're not sharing here, and then it'll get sent out to you following probably a couple of days following the workshop. So that's the plan. So some of AMP's resources. So there are some that are, and for some of you who have been to these before, this might be repetitive. So please bear with me. So these resources, these three that are on the screen here, are work for schools, as well as the online mentor and mentee training, certainly the mentor training for community organizations as well. But the framework for building mentoring relationships in schools is really a good starting place for people who are looking at starting a mentoring initiative in their school, whether it be formal or informal, whether it's bringing in adult mentors from the community or around teen mentors in your school. And it has it asks some really good questions to consider as you start thinking about what it could look like, or even if you've got something going that's more informal and you want to enhance it, there again are some really good questions to consider. There's templates in there that help you look at what kind of supports are available in your community, or potentially where could you find mentors in your community. It looks at different kinds of models of mentoring in schools. So it looks at the teen mentoring, the career and technology studies credits that we'll talk about in a bit. It looks at that idea of transition mentoring, and by that it seems to be a bit of a growing area. And what I mean by the transition mentoring is schools are looking at a form of teen mentoring that helps students make that transition from maybe elementary to junior high to senior high. So pairing up perhaps students in grade 8 with students in grade 6 from a feeder school, maybe starting in January, and having those grade 6 students meet at the junior high, get to know the building. Their grade 8 mentors can help them with some of the things they're worried about coming to junior high. And then when those grade sixes do come, they've got a buddy on the first day. Often that grade 8 student will meet them on the first day and help them find their homeroom or things like that. Similarly with grade 11s and grade 9s, schools are identifying their grade 9 students that they feel might have more difficulty with that transition and pairing them up. And again, not pairing them up with grade 12s or so that the person that they're paired with is still going to be at that school the following year. So information about that and a lot of getting started and planning templates. So again, even if you're not going to follow those templates exactly, they really give some good ideas around starting out.
Caroline, I'm just curious from our participants, if you just want to throw in the chat or unmute, have you had the opportunity to check out our website and work with any of these resources to date? Just a Y for yes and an N for no would be great.
And this is one of the resources that is currently being revised and updated. As you know, we know more, there's more to include in those resources. So look for the new version, probably early in the new year. I suspect that it will be up and available on the website. So until then, the existing one will remain there. Teen Mentoring Toolkit, I like to call this the DIY for teen mentoring in schools. So again, if you are in a community where you have a Big Brothers Big Sisters or another mentoring organization to support you as you get things going, you're really blessed. But in many communities, they don't have that resource, or even in urban centers, there just may not be enough capacity at the organization to be able to support everybody. So specifically for teen mentoring, this really walks you through from the very beginning, again, thinking about what it could look like, things that you need to consider through all the steps that are involved. So recruiting mentors, how would you recruit mentees? How do you screen them? What kind of training is available or do they need? What kind of ongoing support would they need? And then what are some activities that they can do together, all the way down to that idea of match closure. I was just looking at a different resource, and they don't talk about match closure. They talk about transition, which I think I like better than match closure. So we might have to have a conversation about changing that language. But anyway, so that the toolkit takes you through all of that. Currently, the way it's laid out online on the AMP website, you can click on each of those areas and go directly there. So if there's one particular area that you're interested in, you can go right to that and you don't have to go through all the others. And I believe that when it's revised, it's also being revised because many of the links aren't working. Some of the websites that they take you to no longer exist. So that's all being updated. But when it is, I believe it'll be the same format where you can just, if you're interested in training, you can just click on the training part and see what's there. It also has tools that you can download as well. And so there's like a letter that could go home to get permission from families or guardians around their teen mentoring. There is a job description, an application form, some interview questions, and some sample surveys. So they are all in Word format, so you can adapt them and make them your own, but at least it's a starting place so that you're not starting all of those things from scratch. So that toolkit can be really valuable as you start to think about your teen mentoring, even if it's again something really informal like reading buddies. So perhaps you have cross-graded reading buddies in your school, or I know Biggs Calgary has I think taken over Calgary Reads and is doing some of that work. But particularly with teens, there's information in that toolkit that would be relevant and helpful outside of a more formalized kind of mentoring initiative in your school?
That's exactly what I was just going to ask you to kind of touch on, Caroline. For those folks that don't want to go into a more formalized, how could they use these tools for informal? So we're sharing same wavelengths today. The other thing that
Oh,
you can
good.
do is just reach out. You'll get our contact informations at the end, and you can reach out. And I've helped other partners go through the process and just taking a look at either the framework or the Teen Mentoring Toolkit, and then I can help to walk you through and support you as you start this journey.
I was also going to say, just because this came up in conversation before we started today about logic models, and Kirsty is here to talk about, or Christy's here to talk about some of the evaluation work, but there's also some information about logic models in the Teen Mentoring Toolkit, because when this, so this toolkit was actually initially created through AMP providing a grant to the Safe and Caring Schools Society. So that's who started it. And they some of the schools that were piloting it got some grant money that required a logic model. So there's some examples in there too, in case there's some grant money that you're interested in that requires that kind of logic model piece. So that's the toolkit. Again, the revised one, the new and improved version should be available early in the new year. And I should say that these are all downloadable at no cost. So just that little plug there, they're all free. Online mentor and mentee training. So there is online mentor training on the AMP website. It again is at no cost. It takes you through different kinds of topics that would be relevant to for mentors, both adults and teens. So it talks a little bit about risk and protective factors. It talks a little bit about child and youth development and what you might expect at different ages. It talks about some of the safety concerns that need to be addressed. It talks about the role of a mentor versus what is not the role of a mentor. And it is about an hour long, and you can stop and start. So you don't have to go through it all at one time, and it remembers where you left off. And at the end, you can receive a certificate of completion. There's also a hard copy of it that you can download. So when I would do this with youth or with students, I like to have them all together and not have them do it completely independently. So have them all together, each on their own device. So we could walk through it. I could make sure that they were understanding what we were talking about. If there were some students where English wasn't their first language, I could make sure that they were understanding what was happening and could ask questions. So that was my preferred way of doing this. Probably with adults, that's not necessary. But again, we know that with our student mentors, we have a range of reading ability, we have a range of mastery of English, all of those kinds of factors. The mentee training is not available kind of online, but there is a hard copy. Am I correct with that, Andy?
Yeah, that's correct for right now. There's a hard copy of the mentee training.
Because the original platform that it was created on is no longer supported. So we're figuring that piece out. But again, those are both available on the AMP website. And it's really easy to get into the mentor training and follow along and stop and start.
Are there any questions?
There we go. We're really in sync today, Kim.
We are.
Just a comment. If you're starting something in your school or in your after school program or whatever that might be, My advice is find a buddy so that you're not taking this all on your own. I know with the schools that piloted the Teen Mentoring Toolkit, they found if there was sort of two people in the school, and it could be a teacher and education assistant. It could be the librarian and somebody else. It could be somebody from the school and the parent volunteer. It was really helpful to kind of share the load and bounce ideas off each other. So that would be my recommendation. I mean, certainly people have done it on their own, and bless them, and they're superhuman. But I think it's really helpful to have at least two of you or three that are working on this and supporting it. So next, the CTS courses and the high school teen mentoring resources. I don't know, I'm going to start with the second one just because. I don't know how many people are aware that there are career and technology studies courses for high school students where they can earn credits for mentoring. So there are 5 1-credit courses. The courses are also available in French, if that is interesting to anybody. I'm not sure if anybody here has taught the CTS courses. I know that Latoya Bartlett was on our list, but I don't know if she was able to make it or not.
Yeah, I don't see her here, Caroline. If anybody has had the opportunity to teach the career and technology studies, if you could just put a little note in our chat box, that would be great.
Yeah. So again, 1 credit. You don't have to teach them in isolation. And again, Latoya Bartlett that we were just talking about taught these courses right when they were first developed. She was in Fort Vermilion School Division, and she kind of put them all together and looked at, because some of the outcomes cross the courses. And she was generous enough to share a lot of the resources that she used, and we have them posted on our website in the Teen Mentoring portal. And I think we're going to look at that a little bit later. So again, for students, some students are motivated to mentor to get the credits if they're short a couple of credits, but a lot of students are interested in mentoring, and this is just an added bonus for them. So again, there does need to be a certificated teacher involved with these so that they can get the credit, but they can also, there can be a non-certificated person helping to support that. So say perhaps somebody that is going to go, if you've got high school students that are going to the elementary school next door, it wouldn't necessarily have to be the teacher that goes and supervises and supports them there. So that's just something to think about as well, as you think about whether or not this is something that your school could potentially take on.
Caroline, I just want to mention that for some of you who are joining us today who might not be in a role where you are going to be able to start up this mentoring piece, you might take a look and see if you can be involved in it as a support person, as Caroline mentioned, but also take a look at some of these resources within the lens of how you can participate in mentoring, because the benefits of what you get as a mentor are just as important as the benefits that you get as a mentee. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I think we're looking at potentially reviewing the CTS courses and maybe making some changes if necessary. So we are looking for people who have taught it, or if you know somebody who's taught it, we would love to get their contact information, because it would be wonderful to be able to involve those people in doing a review of the courses. So that's just a little plug. If you are interested, or if you know somebody who's using them at a school, that would be fabulous. And the high school teen mentoring resources. So there's a handbook and an activity book. Again, they're both available in French. And the handbook is really written for high school students. Again, I wouldn't recommend handing it out as a workbook and saying, hand it in when you're done. It's really intended to be worked through, as a group with the teacher. It's got some really good information in there about developmental. It kind of looks at developmental assets. It looks at characteristics, again, of children and youth. So if you're working with, if you're paired with a student who's 9, what kinds of things might you expect from a 9-year-old? Sometimes the teens don't remember what it was like to be 9. So it's a little bit of a reminder for them. It looks at communication skills. What's good listening? How do you work through some challenges? It's really focusing on the strength-based piece. It talks about safety and when you need to report something. And it also looks at, it's somewhat career exploration focused. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that when this was initially developed, it was developed in partnership with Advanced Education. But now what we're finding is many high schools and districts are really looking at that idea of career pathways. So we've heard feedback that that piece of it is still relevant. So that can be used as a resource, and the information in it actually lines up with a lot of the outcomes in the CTS courses. So it can really easily be used as a resource in the CTS courses. And the activity book has ideas for things mentors can do with their mentees. Again, it's not really meant to be, here's a worksheet that we'll do together. It's really there to spark some ideas and gets the mentors started thinking about what could that look like. Also, it's a way to present some options to the mentees and see what they would like to do. And in the handbook, it talks a lot about that, about how it's not always about what the mentor wants to do, how they need to look at the mentee and getting to know them and what would they like to do. So a couple again of really good resources for any kind of teens mentoring, whether it's part of the CTS course or not. And again, those resources are available to download from the website. And I know, and Al, maybe you have more information about this. I know that there are hard copies of some of these resources. So if printing them off is prohibitive, then there are some hard copies, I believe, that could be sent out to you.
Yes, we're able to mail out if people needing, copies of some larger documents, they don't want to print them out, we can send them out. Yes.
Great. Thanks, Al.
If
And
that's something that you're looking for, just throw just say, yes, I want a hard copy into the chat box, and then we'll make note of that, and we can connect up after the webinar to get that out to you.
Any questions about those resources? Again, Kim, maybe before we go today, we can go to the website and kind of show where, or maybe Andy's going to do that, show where these are housed.
Yeah, I think after Andy's done, we could certainly do that if he doesn't show us all of those pieces. Any comments or questions before we go on to the next little section?
Okay, so a couple of other resources that aren't directly meant for mentoring in schools, but could be, is the Mentoring Refugee, Immigrant, and Newcomer Children and Youth. So this was put together a few years ago now, and there was a writer hired who has some experience in this area, And he brought together sort of an advisory group from different organizations across the province, and really got some good input into this resource. So it can be it's really helpful. It's divided it's divided into what they call resources, 9 resources. So sort of 9 topics that are addressed in this document. And they look at what would staffing mentoring initiative for refugee, immigrant, newcomer, children and youth. So where might you find mentors? What kind of training would those mentors need? What information would they need to know that would be important for them to be successful in matching with their mentees? It looks at community engagement. So that idea about who is in your community that you could reach out to get more information that might be helpful for your mentors as they prepare to be matched with a refugee, immigrant, newcomer, child or youth. It talks about some of the challenges and what kind of supports are available with some of those challenges. So it can be a really useful tool, whether we're talking about adults or teens who are mentoring, youth that they may not have the same experiences as, and they may not share the same culture or even the same language. So some good tips in there about how to approach that and how to make it successful. So they're like, it's quite, I think each of those little resources is a 1-pager, maybe 2-pager. So there's some good information. It's not a big, long mammoth read. And then the strength-based mentoring, a practice guide for mentors, really, again, stressing that idea that we want to be strength-based. We want our mentors to be strength-based. And I think sometimes our mentees are selected because of a challenge that they have or a certain situation that they find themselves in. And often that is kind of operating from that deficit model, right? We're choosing this person because there's something, they don't have a dad, or they don't have this, or they don't have that. So really not focusing on that, but focusing on the strengths. And just a note on that, we have many, many children and youth who appear to be doing really well, but probably could use a mentor anyway. So it's really talking about how do we look for that mentee's strengths and interests. That idea about what's our mindset, and what might we need to learn about in order to maintain that strength-based approach. I think about a program that we know of that was happening in an elementary school where they were bringing in seniors, older adults, to mentor youth. And this was a school where many of the children had experienced trauma. And so their responses to things were very different than what somebody who comes from a pretty, middle-class family, no issues, would not expect. So there was some training done. They did some lunch and learns around the brain and the impact of trauma on the brain, and perhaps why these children are responding in a way that is unexpected to you. So again, in that idea of being strength-based, what is it that we need to do? And it talks in there about how we need to be affirming and celebrate what's good and strong in our young people, in our mentees, and the idea of narrating their growth and development. Sometimes they don't see it themselves. So one of the strength-based strategies is to point that out, to point out to them the growth that we've seen as our match goes on. So again, really good resource. I think it's a great resource for anybody that works with children and youth, whether it's in a mentoring capacity or not. Something really good to remember. And that idea about ideas to build into the ongoing training. So I think with all mentors, especially with teens, what the research shows is that in successful mentoring initiatives, it's that ongoing training and that ongoing support that really kind of make or break it as far as the success goes.
Caroline,
Any
when we
questions?
talk about the strength-based piece, it also reminds me of, sometimes when we're trying to make those matches with our mentors and our mentees, we tend to take a look at our mentors being those high achieving academic students. And sometimes our students that don't thrive academically, but thrive in other ways, such as physical activities or in any of the areas of the arts. Or some of the times we just don't see a gem out there. Partnering those kiddos up with our younger students, you actually get to see them shine. And so then that's when we can start to see those positives and those successes and those strengths come out in those kiddos, because they definitely surprise us. Those poor attenders all of a sudden start coming because they're matched, and then all of a sudden we start to see lots of positives come out of their educational experiences.
And Kim, I think that's something that we see with both mentors and mentees. If you look at the research on both sides, attendance improves. So for our teen mentors and for our little mentees, or not so little mentees. So Tim.
Caroline, I think we're going to give you a little bit of a break here.
Yes, yay.
And we're going to ask Andy to talk to us a little bit about the Knowledge Hub. I'm going to stop sharing because I believe he's going to share the website and
Yes,
talk about that.
perfect. One. Perfect. Is my screen showing? Great. So yeah, we're working on the Knowledge Hub. So it's like a research portal with all of our resources and resources from other mentoring agencies. And Kirsty will talk on some of the evaluation resources we put in there. So yeah, how it works is generally there's a handful here. Just go to view all. So if you're looking for something specific, if you are looking for Indigenous cultural resources, you can select that and it will filter to what we have. If you're specifically looking for PDFs, again, it'll come up and it'll filter out. So then we'll choose one of A&P's resources. And by downloading it, it'll bring you to the site of where it's housed. And here again, there's more filtering. So if you want more from A&P, you can click on A&P. And here's where all the resources are that were just discussed. And yeah, no, it's a work in progress. We'll be adding to it constantly. So it'll be something really cool. And if you want the hub, here is the link. And it will be linked to the A&P website shortly as well.
Andy, can you pop over to the A&P website just to show our guests what that looks like? And then we can show them right now where they could find some of these resources that Caroline's highlighted.
Perfect. So right off the hub, even the framework, just press download and it will bring you to where it is on the A&P site. And to find it right from albertamentors.ca in resources, mentoring in schools.
So if you just scroll down to that page, you'll see all of those resources are there that Caroline talked about, a few others that we didn't highlight today. And then right down at the bottom is the high school CTS courses that Caroline mentioned. So
And
if you
Kim,
go ahead.
The other the strength-based, there's two strength-based documents or resources. One is on the school website. The other is just under mentoring resources. And that's also where the mentoring refugee, immigrant, newcomer children and youth are too. So some are under this that we talked about are under the school resources, and some are under the more general that Andy's on now. So perfect.
Yes.
So if you just hit into the resources, you're going to see one of those pages and it's going to give you tabs to connect to any of the, if you wanted specifically Indigenous or schools or online orientation, it will take you there. But like Andy had showed initially with that Knowledge Hub, we're going to have a lot easier ways of connecting to getting to this information. For any of you who were part of the AMP portal, the new Knowledge Hub is going to replace the portal. So in the past, AMP had a portal where you had to register and sign up for it, and then you could be connected to other folks. What we've been hearing is that not many folks have the time to get into that portal. So we wanted to create a hub where folks could just easily find what they were looking for in those times when they're time crunched.
So
And,
Kim,
yeah,
will those the resources to support the CTS courses, those will appear now in the Knowledge Hub?
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, anything from the Knowledge Hub between myself and Andy, we'll make sure that those go over, from the portal into the Knowledge Hub to make sure that everything is accessible in that location. So, and it looks like, Andy, do you have anything else you want to share, or can we flip it over to Kirsty?
Yeah, Kirsty, I think we're good on my end.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. So as Kim mentioned, I am working with a partnership between AMP and the Evaluation Capacity Network at the University of Alberta. So the Evaluation Capacity Network, their goal really is to be sort of a hub of support for anything evaluation, and their partnership with AMP is really intended to help any mentoring organizations really build their capacity to do and use evaluation in a way that's meaningful for you. So primarily, we've kind of been working in three sort of areas over the last 2.5-ish years of our partnership. And I think two of them in particular today are really openly available to any of you that are attending today or watching this recording. Another one that's not as openly available that I'll touch on briefly is called eVal. It's a longer term sort of community course, which some of your organizations, as you mentioned, like Youth HQ or Biggs Edmonton, you guys are involved in eVal right now, for other members of your organization are, which is pretty cool. But it is a more time intensive course, and so we do limit participation for that. However, it does get offered right now we've been offering it on a 2-year cycle. That could change in the future to be more often. But it will be an opportunity that if you find some of these other resources really interesting, things that you would want to be on the lookout for might be something like eVal, a future iteration of that. As for the other two resources, the first one that I'll touch on real quick is our evaluation sort of community of practice online. So previously we hosted it at another website, and currently that would be the best place to access it. But it's currently in the process of being revamped as AMP's Engage website. So that will go live very, very shortly for people to log into. But essentially what's on there is a bunch of evaluation resources, access to recordings, access to discussion boards. If you have any questions about anything evaluation related, you can post them to get feedback from other people or from even members of the ECN team as well. So that's a really great resource to access, and right now it's located at the eval.albertamentors.ca website, which is right here. It is a little bit tricky to get into, which is why we're revamping it. But if you start logging in right now, there is a nice little video showing you how to get access. So I would recommend watching that video to get you started on there. The other one that I'll touch on is one that you can actually access right now through the eval.albertamentors.ca website, but in the future will be on the Engage website when that gets launched. But it's our pre-eval series. So this is really a webinar series that is intended to be an introduction to evaluation. So if you're doing anything evaluation related with your mentoring programs, then you are able to go to this webinar. There's 8 webinars, and watch them individually, in succession, all together. In the future, it'll be that you have to watch the whole series, but it goes through 8 different topics with evaluation. Each one's an hour, and it talks about everything from designing a stakeholder map, how to engage stakeholders in designing an evaluation, how to think about a logic model and design a logic model and a theory of change, what your evaluation questions might be, how to collect data, anything related to building a plan for your evaluation. And then when it comes to actually doing the evaluation, that's where some of those other resources on the website will be useful. So with that pre-eval sort of series, if you watch all 8 of them, you do get a certificate of completion indicating you've done this 8 hours of evaluation training. Yes, thank you, Caroline. Yes, I misspelt Alberta. That's why it didn't work. Typing fast. There we go. That should work now. So yeah, you can go on there and watch that series. We encourage you, if you're going to watch any part of that series, we have our own meta evaluation of our evaluation training. So if you do that, we ask you to do a little quick pre and post where you can see how much did my evaluation knowledge grow. So you can do a little survey before, get a little bit of information about your evaluation capacity going into that series, and then you can do it afterwards as well. So we really do love that series because it really does prep you to understand that you do have a lot of evaluation capacity already in your programs, and that doing evaluation doesn't take a whole lot to do in a community-based way. It's really just about rethinking what you're already doing and how to use that to inform and demonstrate your impact with kiddos. So it's really great even if you're already an expert in evaluation, which you have, if you are, I don't know how you did that, please tell me. But if you are already an expert in evaluation, even just sharing that with other people in your organization so that they can speak some of the same language as you is really, really great. So that's what we have for that. If you want to also access the Eval website, the same place where Andy showed you the drop down for resources, there is an evaluation tab, and you can get everything related to evaluation partnership between ECN and AMP right there. So when the new Engage website's ready to go, you'll be able to access it that way as well.
Kirsty, we throw so many acronyms around. I just want to explain that AMP is short for Alberta Mentoring Partnership, and Kirsty, help me out. ECN is?
Evaluation Capacity Network. Thank
Right.
you. I do talk a lot of acronyms, and then I say e-eval and pre-eval as our course names, and it gets very confusing. There's a lot of eval e's. So thanks, Kim.
Are there any questions? Well, we have Kirsty, who is, in my mind, our evaluation expert.
Kirsty, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking about schools that are schools that either have a mentoring initiative or looking at starting one, who may not need as rigorous an evaluation as maybe some organizations do. Would some of that pre-eval, would some of those webinars be helpful? Like if they're just thinking about, maybe they've started something and they want to enhance it or keep it going, and they might need to make a case for why, would some of that be helpful?
Yeah, definitely. We have different topics. So even if you're not looking at, making a stakeholder map, for example, you might want to watch the one about collecting data and different ways to collect data and how to do it in a really community-based way, or how to share knowledge most effectively with different types of people. And if watching those webinars, doesn't seem to fit for you as well, on that Knowledge Hub, there are little things like evaluation briefs, for example. They're little 2-pagers on evaluation information, like how to design a really good questionnaire that will help you get good response rates, how to get people to do your questionnaire after you design it. So all sorts of great resources. There's also longer ones about how to start discussions about evaluation with maybe your funders or your school board or whoever it might be, as another type of resource. So lots of great resources on that Knowledge Hub as well, if maybe pre-eval doesn't seem like the fit for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to thank our guests, Andy and Kirsty, for joining us. I'm not sure if they have something else to head off to. So if they need to leave us, thank you so much. If you want to stay and join us for the next half hour, we would most welcome you to stay and join us with that as we go into our next piece here.
Kim, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I just found my little bar. It wasn't coming down properly. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to share a video clip from our Indigenous lead, Tanya Taranjo. I know that we've been sitting for a little bit, so if you would like to, if you have your camera on, if you'd like to turn it off and just stand up while you listen to Tanya share about our Indigenous resources, that will give you a little bit of a movement break.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Taranjo, and I'm the Indigenous Engagement Lead with AMP. And I'm here to share information about our resources that are available through our website that can support you in building your mentoring program for Indigenous youth or enhancing your program for Indigenous youth. So I'm just going to take a minute here and share my screen with you. And to access our website, you would go to albertamentors.ca. And what I'm showing you here is our Indigenous Mentoring resource page. Now that we are currently updating our website, so this will change and evolve as we add more resources and find more ways to support Indigenous mentoring programs. But for right now, if you went to albertamentors.ca/Indigenous mentoring, you would find our main resources that are available that we've put together. Now at the top, you'll see 3 tools that you can download. And I've minimized the page so you can see all these tools at once. Now, I highly suggest that you download these 3 tools, 1, 2, 3 at the top, because they complement this guide right below it, the 4th resource that's available. So the 4th resource is what I'm going to start with, the Considerations for Mentoring Indigenous Children and Youth. It's a really fantastic guide that was put together in 2017 by 2 doctors at the U of A. And together, these doctors consulted and engaged with several community members and organizations across Alberta, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And they put together a list of considerations with suggested actions for you to consider when you're putting together your Indigenous mentoring program. Now, it's quite a lengthy read. So what I've done is I've put together these 3 tools that complement the guide. Now I'm going to just switch to the screen where the tools are. Now, within these tools, they tell you where to go within that guide to get more information that will assist you. So for example, in the first tool, the components of effective Indigenous mentoring programs, it talks about consult Indigenous youth in the community. And so that's consideration 1 within the guide, and you'll find that within page 10 to 11. And within the other tools, you'll see The second one is engaging Indigenous community organizations and supporting an Indigenous mentoring program, which is really important. You want that local support and engagement, and also you'll draw from the knowledge of the community members who would be involved. And last one is engaging Indigenous mentors. You know, there's fantastic research out of Mentor Canada that identifies Indigenous adults as 5 times more likely to become mentors. So how do you reach those adults? Well, you do it by ensuring that you're developing an annual communication strategy and ensuring that you're constantly making the community members aware of your mentoring program. And there's further considerations for you to consider when you're recruiting Indigenous mentors. But I'm also a fan of having non-Indigenous mentors for Indigenous youth as well, because we have to have that opportunity for youth to walk in both worlds. And so along with engaging Indigenous mentors, I encourage you to utilize the opportunity to mentor Indigenous youth as an action of reconciliation that potentially a non-Indigenous mentor can take on. Now, further down the page, you'll see our Powwow 101 guide, and that's exactly what it is. It's a list of protocol and tips for attending your first powwow. And if you haven't signed up to our newsletter yet, I highly recommend that you do, because on a bi-weekly basis, I add various events across Alberta that you can attend. And the number one rule is if you see a poster or an event shared, that means as a non-Indigenous person, Indigenous person that doesn't belong to the community, you can attend that event. And so a guide like that will assist, you know, in understanding some of the protocol, but also understanding that at our Indigenous events, there's normally an MC that's going to guide you through understanding the event. And don't be shy to attend events with an open mind and an open heart and a willingness to learn. And at the bottom of the page right now is previous webinars that are available for you to view. 4 of them are from knowledge keepers and our elders. And they really give the opportunity to have a unique insight from an Indigenous person about our culture, ceremonies, prayers, reconciliation, and the need for mentoring Indigenous youth in our communities. And the last webinar that was done June 21st, 2021, you know, so the collaboration between partners across Alberta, bringing awareness about Indigenous mentoring and hopefully encouraging more to sign up to be a mentor for Indigenous youth. And so that's a high overview of what we have available currently. As I said, we'll be updating our website. There'll be more resources shared about culture, about mentor training, mentee training, and more to come just from collaborating with our partners and engaging our community members. So I encourage you to check out our page. If you want to know more, feel free to email me, tanya.toronto@albertamentors.ca, and please sign up for our newsletter. Masicho, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
That was our wonderful Indigenous lead, Tanya Toronto. Anybody have some questions? Because I do know that possibly myself or Caroline or Al could answer any of those questions for you if you had anything. Thank you, Andy, for putting Tanya's email address in the chat box for us. Okay. The AMP team is going to take a break from chit-chatting and sharing. What we want to hear from you are, what are some of the great resources that you use or that you know of? And we'd love it if you just want to, even if it's just a little video clip that you show with kids to help encourage mentoring, we're all about sharing those great resources. So if you'd like to unmute and share or throw it in the chat box, that would be great. We have Sue here from the Edmonton Public Library. I was wondering, Sue, if you could share with us some of the resources that that you use with your program.
Hi. We actually try to develop some of our own for staff training, and I was just thinking about reading buddies. We have some of that, and we've used Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain, so understanding the brain development there. That's a good one, but actually that's one that I got from your site. So I have used your website quite often when we were piloting restorative practices and are looking at some of the resources for understanding teens and youth. But right off the top of my head, I can't think of any right now. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you for being brave and sharing as I put you out on the spot. Just understanding that you're coming at your mentoring program through brain development is a great resource for us to contemplate and think about.
One thing I would add is not exclusively mentoring, but we found that a lot of teens gained a lot of insights from attending our elder and resident NOCUM Joanne's virtual sessions or in person. As an elder and resident, she is accessible to people of all ages, and we found that teens gravitate towards her in learning more about their own cultural protocols, but also in connecting to their Indigenous roots and then paying it forward. So that's one way to think about connecting youth to an elder in residence, is that they can also get informal mentorship through our NOCUM Joanne.
Thank you, Sue. Is there anybody else out there that would like to share their little nugget of resources with us? Caroline, we have a quiet group today.
We do. They can always too, I mean, we share our contact information. So if people just can't, at the end of the day, if you just can't think of anything that you're using and then it comes to you later, then you please feel free to email one of us and then we can add that resource to our list.
Okay. And if you have any nuggets that come to you as we go through our next piece, just throw it in the chat box and we can add it to the resource list that will go out to the group. Some of the other resources, so for those of you that are new to the Alberta Mentoring Partnership, we hosted a summit in October, and we had a variety of guest speakers who came and presented. Caroline presented a couple of sessions. We also had Junior Achievement and Ever Active Schools come and present. So those webinars are on the website. If you go to the Summit 2022, you can click on those webinars links and enjoy them in your own time. I know that sometimes I didn't get a chance to enjoy all of them because I was doing other pieces during that day, but I have had the opportunity to just turn one on and listen to it and take those little nuggets away with me as I'm doing other things on the side of my desk. So Junior Achievement, we had Angelica Hogan, who joined us, and she shared about their programming that is all curriculum linked, and it's free of charge, and they really focus on financial literacy, work readiness, and entrepreneurial courses that can be completed within the classroom, and it can be led by a volunteer that they can provide out to the school, or they can have the teachers lead the courses, or students can enroll in a self-directed option. So there's 3 different ways to access their courses. I have been given her contact information to share with you, so I'll throw that in the chat box in a moment. The other resource that I just wanted to share out with you is Everactive Schools has an Indigenous Youth Mentoring Program, or IYMP, and they provided a session for us at Summit and talked about how they get youth active within schools in after school mentoring programs. So these are just kind of some links that I'll throw into the chat box for you. I've been part of some intergenerational mentoring workshops recently, and so that's why I added these 2 links with linkages and linking generations. Linkages is out of Calgary and linking generations is out of Sherwood Park, and they provide programs to link youth with seniors and how those mentoring opportunities work. And so I wanted to share those 2 areas with this group today. So if you are close to a senior or assisted living complex, and you're thinking that that might be a good way to connect your kiddos up, this is another opportunity. Both ladies involved that I've connected up with are very open to fielding any questions if you're interested in starting an intergenerational mentoring program. One that I just heard about the other day was Diverse Generations, which is a mentoring project out of Cold Lake. And they're using a mentoring project called Life Stories, where they use story starters such as tell me about a time that you got into trouble as a youth, and it would be youth asking seniors these questions. Tell me about a time that you did something really well in school and how it made you feel. So they have these little prompted questions, they record them, and they're going to be compiling a book that will come out in January to be shared with the community. So those are a few little pieces about intergenerational mentoring. Caroline?
And I was just going to say that I think the benefits, I think in every mentoring relationship, the benefits are reciprocal, but I think we really have seen, and especially with COVID, the mental health benefits to the seniors or the older adults, as well as to the mentees. And I know in one particular initiative, even though it ended up going online, of course, during COVID, the mentors talked about how that meeting with their mentees every week gave them purpose. It was really, there was some interviews done, and it was really quite emotional when they talked about the benefits to them with that mentoring kind of program. So just another piece there. But this the last one on the page, this 52 mentoring activities, one for each week. It's actually mentoring activities that were designed for intergenerational mentoring, but there's also lots of ideas on there just for any kind of mentoring. I mean, not all of them are going to be appropriate, nor is there going to be time for people to engage in some of them, but there's some really great ideas there to look at, just to get our mentors thinking about what could they do. And actually, Kim, it's interesting because one of them is quite similar to the one that you described, kind of like an interview kind of setup. So again, if you Google mentoring activities, lots of different lists come up. This was just one that I chose to put in here. So kind of a smattering of non-AMP resources that support the resources that AMP has. So this ABCs of school-based mentoring is a collaboration between several different organizations, one of which is the Hamilton Fish Institute, which I had never heard of before. But they have, they're a contributor to this resource. Plus, they also have supplementary resources, like one specifically on building relationships and some others that would be great. I would think they would be great in schools, even outside of a mentoring initiative. But this one, while you can't just go to certain sections, it's got a really great table of contents. So if I want to look at training, I can just look at what page that's on and kind of scroll through that. And it's got the same areas as the AMP documents when we think about recruiting and screening and training and ongoing support. But it also offers some additional ideas and also some sample forms. So that could be helpful as well as a supplementary resource. Education Northwest, if you go to this particular link, which you will get, it's got in January 2022, so recently, they put together a list of resources. So there's kind of a whole bunch in one spot on that Education Northwest website. Some of them are the ones that are mentioned, are other ones that are mentioned here. So it's kind of a one-stop shop if you're looking for some supplementary resources. The Mentoring Partnership of Southwestern Pennsylvania has, if you sign up, if you go to this website and sign up for their, I think it's like their mentoring weekly tips. So you can sign up for their weekly tips, and every week you get an email with a different mentoring tip. So some organizations probably already know about that. Great idea for schools. Some of the tips, again, go beyond just mentoring. They can be relevant to any kind of relationship that a person might have with a child or a youth. And they're built on the Search Institute's developmental assets. So usually each tip would correspond or support one of the developmental assets. So it's kind of fun. I get one every week. Sometimes, you know, I think they're really useful. Other times, maybe not as useful, but they're not long. They're short little reads and something that might be worthwhile. I know sometimes AMP puts those in their newsletters and sends them out as well. And then this link for the National Mentoring Resource Center. Again, it houses a lot of different resources. And what I liked about this one is they're organized by subject or category. So you can go on there, and if you're specifically looking for something around recruiting mentors, you can just click on that and different resources pop up that are related to that particular topic. And then I think, and all of these will be included. You'll have them in the slide deck, but they'll also be included on the list that we'll send out later. And I think, Al, were you going to talk about connections first?
Absolutely. Thanks, Carolyn. Great list of resources. Thank you for your continued work building out these resources and sharing them with everybody. Connections first, I'm just putting the link in the chat. It is part of the natural supports work that's going on. It started a number of years ago. There's a natural supports leadership table that is now kind of provincially, and AMP is one of the partners with that group. And then Connections First focuses on natural supports. And a lot of times we get the question, well, what is a natural support? And it's defined as a mutually supportive relationship that includes close connections such as family and friends, or broader connections such as neighbors, coaches, community organizations, and local businesses. So a lot of people, and it was talked about earlier, mentoring can take on so many different forms within a community. It can be formalized, and it can be a lot of these programs we're talking about, but it can also happen just naturally within your own community. And we talk about one of the examples, and you'll find in the resources section on Connections First, reference to social snacking. And there's a little poster you can download, and there's little tips. And social snacking is really brief or informal positive interactions in daily events. So it could be things like greeting your school bus driver, or saying hello to your neighbor, offering your seat on the bus, smiling with your eyes over your mask to the person in line, or in a store, or distracting a busy child for somebody else when they're trying to pay at the registers. Like finding a way to just connect with somebody and provide that support in real time, and just giving that positive interaction. And just that quick example of social snacking, people have been able to use those in their daily life, in their schools, in their programs, and just find a way to, make somebody's day that much better. And find that mentoring can be happening in so many ways in communities, in a formalized setting, but also just informally in a day-to-day interaction. And so the whole Connections First website has built out a number of resources, some studies, work that's gone on. And around the National Supports Leadership Table right now, we're looking at ways to expand that work and try and make natural supports language more common across our communities, and trying to find ways to better our communities as we go through some challenging times and some changes in our environments around us. We're trying to find ways to reconnect people and bring smiles back to people's faces. So take a look at the Connections First website and look at the materials that are there, and then reach out if you have any questions about it. Or there's lots of groups, especially within Calgary. There's a community of practice that's using these principles within all of their work, and we're trying to expand that and bring on more partners around the province. So yeah, check out the website and then let us know if there's any questions as you go through it. Thanks, Caroline. Thanks
for sharing that, Al. Caroline and I and Al have all shared this social snacking at various webinars or various places, and people are really creative with them. So Connections First has little TikTok videos. Some schools have turned it into challenges to see how many social snacking opportunities kids can do within a time period. Caroline, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, just, I go, and people, you probably all have a story like this, but I go to the same market every Saturday morning, and I do some shopping for my in-laws. And one of my little routines is I grab a latte. And the people at this, I don't know how many people I see there, lots. It's a market that's open Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And they always remember your name. They remember what it is that you order. When I went on Saturday, my husband's out of town. And so when I ordered my latte, they said, "Oh, don't you need a tea?" Because that's what he always gets. And, just that the research supports how that makes such a big difference to people's mental health, and it really does. So I told them once, you are the perfect example of social snacking, and I explained it to them. And that's just one example of how those really simple interactions can make a big difference in somebody's day.
Thanks for that, Caroline. And you have a few more resources you wanted to share.
Just a few here, and these are specific to teen mentoring. So often teen mentoring is referred to peer mentoring or cross-age mentoring. I should just add that what the research shows is that a 2-year or more age gap between the mentor and the mentee gets the best results. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because they'll be on your list. But the first one, very similar to the Teen Mentoring Toolkit. Two things I really loved about this one, as Kim mentioned earlier, they talk about a variety of mentors and not always choosing your high academic achievers. So I love that about this resource. It also has some great information and ideas about training. And again, with peer mentoring, what keeps coming up over and over again is that the ongoing training and the ongoing support are critical. So it's got lots of great information about the training piece. Peer mentoring supplement from Mentor US. They have a huge document around elements of effective practice for mentoring, which I would say is probably more geared towards organizations, but they have a peer mentoring supplement that's got some, again, some tips for successful peer mentoring. And this peer mentoring handbook, it's also developed by the Partnership of Southwest Pennsylvania. So the same group that has those weekly tips, and it's written by youth for youth. So it's really a kind of a cool, easy to read handbook for your teen mentors. And they talk about the stages of the mentoring relationship and tips about your first meeting, and then building the relationship and enhancing it, and then sustaining it. And then that's the document that talks about transitioning instead of closure. Words matter. I think that's kind of a cool way of referring to perhaps the end of the formal match. Anyway, so those are just a few more that we'll include in our list.
So what we would like is for you to take a couple of minutes to give us some feedback and to help shape our future sessions. So if you could take a few minutes to fill out our survey, we would greatly appreciate that. I'm just going to play some music here for you, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. Thank you so much for taking the time to fill out that survey so that it can help us as we plan for our next webinar and find out what you need as mentoring partners out there. Some upcoming AMP events. Starting in January, we have Mentor Month that will be celebrated across the province. And our goals this year are to really focus on recruiting our volunteers and share public awareness and education around the benefits of mentoring. We also want to celebrate our mentors, our mentees, and any of our leaders of our mentoring programs out across the province. And during our first week, we'll be focusing in on Indigenous mentoring. During our second week, we're going to focus in on service to our male youth. We're going to have a focus on literacy and mentoring in schools in week 3, and possibly a focus on research in week 4. So to find out more information about that, if you go onto our website and sign up for our newsletter, another way to get our information is to sign up as an AMP partner. And perhaps Al could throw that information into the chat box for us. In May, Caroline and I will be co-hosting a webinar. Our date is yet to be determined, but it will be more than likely within those first 2 weeks of May. And we're still working out the topic, so your feedback from the survey will help us with that. Tanya Tarajo will be hosting some Knowledge Keeper series, and those dates are going to be determined and will be advertised on our website and in our newsletter. The other piece that I meant to mention earlier is Tanya is working with George Deserlet on a series called Star Stories. So he tells Indigenous stories about our star system. And he's created a series of small clips that you can use with your mentee, that you can use in the classroom. And those pieces should be out sometime in January. Before we leave, we would like you to share your one takeaway. So if you could plop into the chat box, what is one thing that you took away from today's webinar? And at the end of that, we will be around to answer any questions, and we will share our contact information with you. I know for myself, my one takeaway is what Sue added in the chat box, that the Edmonton Public Library has a free mentoring tutoring program that I wasn't aware of, called Discover Prep, that mentors teens online. Thanks, Michelle. We hope that you'll come back and join us another time. Carly, I'm glad that you've got some other great resources to use. Dipali, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. I noted in the chat box that you're just starting out. So if you need any other support, please feel free to reach out to Caroline, myself, or Al. Probably best to reach out to Al or myself first, and then we can connect up with Caroline, as she has other pieces in her day that are wrapped up. Karen, thanks for sharing that there's informal ways to use this information and the idea of social snacking. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please stay warm if you need to venture out from wherever you are to get home. If you're already home, make sure that you stay bundled up until, I know here in Edmonton, it's supposed to get nicer overnight, so we won't be in this deep freeze for very long. Thanks again for joining us.